Don't forget to subscribe. Afterwards, the wisest and most spiritual books from the greatest authors await you every day. And now buckle up, sit back and we'll begin. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. The Secret Doctrine. Primordial substance and divine thought. As it would seem irrational to affirm that we already know all existing causes, permission must be given to assume, if need be, an entirely new agent. Assuming, what is not strictly accurate as yet, that the undulatory hypothesis accounts for all the facts, we are called on to decide whether the existence of an undulating ether is thereby proved. We cannot positively affirm that no other supposition will explain the facts. Newton's corpuscular hypothesis is admitted to have broken down on interference, and there is, at the present day, no rival. Still, it is extremely desirable in all such hypotheses to find some collateral confirmation, some evidence salient, of the supposed ether. Some hypotheses consist of assumptions as to the minute structure and operations of bodies. From the nature of the case, these assumptions can never be proved by direct means. Their only merit is their suitability to express the phenomena. They are representative fictions. Ether, this hypothetical Proteus, one of the representative fictions of modern science, which, nevertheless, was so long accepted as one of the lower principles of what we call primordial substance, Akasha, in Sanskrit, one of the dreams of old, which has now again become the dream of modern science. It is the greatest, as it is the boldest, of the surviving speculations of ancient philosophers. For the occultists, however, both ether and the primordial substance are realities. To put it plainly, ether is the astral light, and the primordial substance is Akasha, the upadhi of divine thought. In modern language, the latter would be better named cosmic ideation, spirit, the former, cosmic substance, matter. These, the alpha and the omega of being, are but the two facets of the one absolute existence. The latter was never addressed, or even mentioned, by any name in antiquity, except in allegory. In the oldest Aryan race, the Hindu, the worship of the intellectual classes at no time ever consisted in an adoration of marvelous form and art, however fervent, as with the Greeks, an adoration which led later on to anthropomorphism. But while the Greek philosopher adored form, and the Hindu sage alone perceived the true relation of earthly beauty and eternal truth, the uneducated of every nation understood neither, at any time. They do not understand it even now. The evolution of the God idea proceeds apace with man's own intellectual evolution. So true is it that the noblest ideal to which the religious spirit of one age can soar will appear but a gross caricature to the philosophic mind in a succeeding epoch. The philosophers themselves had to be initiated into perceptive mysteries before they could grasp the correct idea of the ancients in relation to this most metaphysical subject. Otherwise, outside such initiation, for every thinker there will be a "thus far shalt thou go," and no farther mapped out by his intellectual capacity, as clearly and as unmistakably as there is one for the progress of any nation or race in its cycle by the law of karma. Outside of initiation, the ideals of contemporary religious thought must always have their wings clipped and remain unable to soar higher, for idealistic, as well as realistic, thinkers, and even free thinkers, are but the outcome and the natural product of their respective environments and periods. The ideals of each are but the necessary results of their temperaments, and the outcome of that phase of intellectual progress to which a nation, in its collectivity, has attained. Hence, as already remarked, The highest flights of modern Western metaphysics have fallen far short of the truth. Much of current agnostic speculation on the existence of the first cause is little better than veiled materialism, the terminology alone being different. Even so great a thinker as Mr. Herbert Spencer speaks of the unknowable occasionally in terms that demonstrate the lethal influence of materialistic thought, which, like the deadly sirocco, has withered and blighted all current ontological speculation. For instance, when he terms the first cause the unknowable, a power manifesting through phenomena and an infinite eternal energy, it is clear that he has grasped solely the physical aspect of the mystery of being, the energies of cosmic substance only. The co-eternal aspect of the one reality, cosmic ideation, is absolutely omitted from consideration, and as to its noumenon, it seems non-existent in the mind of the great thinker. Without doubt, this one-sided mode of dealing with the problem is due largely to the pernicious Western practice of subordinating consciousness to matter, or regarding it as a byproduct of molecular motion. From the early ages of the fourth race, when spirit alone was worshipped and the mystery was made manifest, down to the last palmy days of Grecian art, at the dawn of Christianity, the Hellenes alone had dared publicly to raise an altar to the unknown god. Whatever street Paul may have had in his profound mind when declaring to the Athenians that this unknown which they ignorantly worshipped was the true God, announced by himself that deity was not Jehovah, nor was he the maker of the world and all things. For it is not the God of Israel, but the unknown of the ancient and modern pantheist, that dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Divine thought cannot be defined, nor can its meaning be explained, except by the numberless manifestations of cosmic substance, in which the former is sensed spiritually by those who can do so. To say this, after having defined it as the unknown deity, abstract, impersonal, sexless, which must be placed at the root of every cosmogony and its subsequent evolution, is equivalent to saying nothing at all. It is like attempting a transcendental equation of conditions, having in hand for deducing the true value of its terms only a number of unknown quantities. Its place is found in the old primitive symbolic charts, in which, as already shown, it is represented by a boundless darkness, on the ground of which appears the first central point in white, thus symbolizing coeval and coeternal spirit matter, making its appearance in the phenomenal world before its first differentiation. When the one becomes two, it may then be referred to as spirit and matter. To spirit is referable every manifestation of consciousness, reflective or direct, and of unconscious purposiveness. To adopt a modern expression used in Western philosophy, so-called as evidenced in the vital principle, and nature's submission to the majestic sequence of immutable law. Matter must be regarded as objectivity in its purest abstraction, the self-existing basis, whose septenary manvantaric differentiations constitute the objective reality underlying the phenomena of each phase of conscious existence. During the period of universal pralaya, cosmic ideation is non-existent, and the variously differentiated states of cosmic substance are resolved back again into the primary state of abstract potential objectivity. Manvantaric impulse commences with the reawakening of cosmic ideation, the universal mind, concurrently with, and parallel to, the primary emergence of cosmic substance, the latter being the manvantaric vehicle of the former from its undifferentiated pralaic state. Then, absolute wisdom mirrors itself in its ideation, which, by a transcendental process, superior to and incomprehensible by human consciousness, results in cosmic energy, Fohit. Thrilling through the bosom of inert substance, Fohit impels it to activity and guides its primary differentiations on all the 7 planes of cosmic consciousness. There are thus 7 protiles as they are now called, whereas Aryan antiquity named them the 7 Prakritis, or natures serving, severally, as the relatively homogeneous bases, which in the course of the increasing heterogeneity in the evolution of the universe, differentiate into the marvelous complexity presented by phenomena on the planes of perception. The term relatively is used designedly because the very existence of such a process, resulting in the primary segregations of undifferentiated cosmic substance into its septenary bases of evolution, compels us to regard the protile of each plane as only a mediate phase assumed by substance in its passage from abstract into full objectivity. The term protile is due to Mr. Crookes, the eminent chemist, who has given that name to pre-matter, if one may so call primordial and purely homogeneous substance, suspected, if not actually yet found, by science in the ultimate composition of the atom. But the incipient segregation of primordial matter into atoms and molecules takes its rise subsequent to the evolution of our 7 protiles. It is the last of these that Mr. Crookes is in search of, having recently detected the possibility of its existence on our plane. Cosmic ideation is said to be non-existent during prolaic periods, for the simple reason that there is no one and nothing to perceive its effects. There can be no manifestation of consciousness, semi-consciousness, or even unconscious purposiveness, except through a vehicle of matter, that is to say, on this our plane, wherein human consciousness, in its normal state, cannot soar beyond what is known as transcendental metaphysics. It is only through some molecular aggregation, or fabric, that spirit wells up in a stream of individual or subconscious subjectivity. And as matter existing apart from perception is a mere abstraction, both of these aspects of the absolute cosmic substance and cosmic ideation are mutually interdependent. In strict accuracy, to avoid confusion and misconception, the term matter ought to be applied to the aggregate of objects of possible perception, and the term substance to noumena, for inasmuch as the phenomena of our plane are the creations of the perceiving ego, the modifications of its own subjectivity, all the states of matter representing the aggregate of perceived objects can have but a relative and purely phenomenal existence for the children of our plane. As the modern idealists would say, the cooperation of subject and object results in the sense-object, or phenomenon. But this does not necessarily lead to the conclusion that it is the same on all other planes, that the cooperation of the two, on the planes of their septenary differentiation, results in a septenary aggregate of phenomena which are likewise non-existent per se, though concrete realities for the entities of whose experience they form a part, in the same manner as the rocks and rivers around us are real from the standpoint of a physicist, though unreal illusions of sense from that of the metaphysician. It would be an error to say, or even conceive, such a thing. From the standpoint of the highest metaphysics, the whole universe, gods included, is an illusion, Maya. But the illusion of him who is in himself an illusion differs on every plane of consciousness, and we have no more right to dogmatize about the possible nature of the perceptive faculties of an ego on, say, the 6th plane, than we have to identify our perceptions with, or make them a standard for, those of an ant, in its mode of consciousness. Cosmic ideation focused on a principle, or upadhi, basis, results as the consciousness of the individual ego. Its manifestation varies with the degree of the upadhi. For instance, through that known as manas, it wells up as mind consciousness. Through the more finely differentiated fabric, sixth state of matter, of buddhi resting on the experience of manas as its basis as a stream of spiritual intuition. The pure object apart from consciousness is unknown to us, while living on the plane of our three-dimensional world, for we know only the mental states it excites in the perceiving ego. And, so long as the contrast of subject and object endures, to wit, so long as we enjoy our five senses and no more, and do not know how to divorce our all-perceiving ego from the thraldom of these senses, so long will it be impossible for the personal ego to break through the barrier which separates it from a knowledge of things in themselves or substance. That ego, progressing in an arc of ascending subjectivity, must exhaust the experience of every plane. But not till the unit is merged in the all, whether on this or any other plane, and subject and object alike vanish in the absolute negation of the nirvanic state. Negation, again, only from our plane. Not until then is scaled that peak of omniscience, the knowledge of things in themselves, and the solution of the yet more awful riddle approached, before which even the highest Dayan Chohan must bow in silence and ignorance. The unspeakable mystery of that which is called by the Vedantins Parabrahman. Therefore, such being the case, all those who have sought to give a name to the incognizable principle have simply degraded it. Even to speak of cosmic ideation save in its phenomenal aspect is like trying to bottle up primordial chaos, or to put a printed label on eternity. What, then, is the primordial substance, that mysterious object of which alchemy was ever talking, and which was the subject of philosophical speculation in every age? What can it be finally, even in its phenomenal pre-differentiation? Even that is the all of manifested nature and nothing to our senses. It is mentioned under various names in every cosmogony, referred to in every philosophy, and shown to be, to this day, the ever-grasp-eluding Proteus in nature. We touch and do not feel it, we look at it without seeing it, we breathe it and do not perceive it, we hear and smell it without the smallest cognition that it is there, for it is in every molecule of that which, in our illusion and ignorance, we regard as matter in any of its states, or conceive as a feeling, a thought, an emotion. In short, it is the upadhi, or vehicle, of every possible phenomenon, whether physical, mental, or psychic. In the opening sentences of Genesis, and in the Chaldean cosmogony, in the Puranas of India, and in the Book of the Dead of Egypt, everywhere it opens the cycle of manifestation. It is termed chaos, and the face of the waters, incubated by the spirit, proceeding from the unknown, whatever that spirit's name may be. The authors of the sacred scriptures in India go deeper into the origin of the evolution of things than does Thales or Job, for they say, from intelligence called Mahat, in the Puranas, associated with ignorance Ishvara, as a personal deity, attended by its projective power, in which the quality of dullness tamas, insensibility predominates, proceeds ether from ether, air from air, heat from heat, water, and from water, earth with everything on it. From this same self, was the ether produced, says the Veda. It thus becomes evident that it is not this ether sprung at the fourth remove from an emanation of intelligence, associated with ignorance, which is the high principle, the deific entity, worshipped by the Greeks and Latins under the name of Pater, omnipotens ether and magnus ether in its collective aggregate. The septenary gradation, and the innumerable subdivisions and differences made by the ancients between the powers of ether collectively, from its outward fringe of effects, with which our science is so familiar, up to the imponderable substance once admitted as the ether of space, but now about to be rejected, have been ever a vexing riddle for every branch of knowledge. The mythologists and symbologists of our day, confused by this incomprehensible glorification on the one hand and degradation on the other of the same deified entity and in the same religious systems, are often driven to the most ludicrous mistakes. The Church, firm as a rock in each and all of her early errors of interpretation, has made of ether the abode of her satanic legions. The whole hierarchy of the fallen angels is there, cosmocrators, the world-bearers according to Bossuet, mundi tenentes, the world-holders as Tertullian calls them, mundi domini, world dominations or rather dominators, the curbati, or curved etc. Thus making of the stars and celestial orbs in their courses devils. For it is thus that the Church has interpreted the verse. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Further, St. Paul mentions the spiritual malices, wickedness in English texts, in the Air Spiritualium Equitii Coelestibus, the Latin texts, giving various names to these malices, the innocent elementals. But the Church is right this time, though wrong in calling them all devils. The astral light, or lower ether, is full of conscious, semi-conscious and unconscious entities. Only the Church has less power over them than over invisible microbes or mosquitoes. The difference made between the 7 states of ether itself one of the 7 cosmic principles, whereas the ether of the ancients is universal fire, may be seen in the injunctions by Zoroaster and Celis, respectively. The former said, "Consult it only when it is without form or figure, absque forma et figura, which means, without flames or burning coals. When it has a form, heed it not," teaches Celis, "but when it is formless, obey it, for it is then sacred fire, and all it will reveal thee shall be true." This proves that ether, itself an aspect of Akasha, has in its turn several aspects or principles. All the ancient nations deified ether in its imponderable aspect and potency. Virgil calls Jupiter, pater omnipotens ether, and the great ether. The Hindus have also placed it among their deities, under the name of Akasha, the synthesis of ether. And the author of the Homoeomerian system of philosophy, Anaxagoras of Clazomenae, firmly believed that the spiritual prototypes of all things, as well as their elements, were to be found in the boundless ether, where they were generated, whence they evolved, and whither they returned, an occult teaching. It thus becomes clear that it is from ether, in its highest synthetic aspect, once anthropomorphized, that sprang the first idea of a personal creative deity. With the philosophical Hindus, the elements are tamasa, unenlightened by intellect, which they obscure. We have now to exhaust a question of the mystical meaning of primordial chaos and of the root principle, and show how they were connected in the ancient philosophies with Akasha, incorrectly translated ether, and also with Maya, illusion, of which Ishvara is the male aspect. We shall speak further on of the intelligent principle, or rather of the invisible immaterial properties, in the visible and material elements, that sprang from the primordial chaos. For what is the primordial chaos but ether? It is asked, in Isis Unveiled. Not the modern ether, not such as is recognized now, but such as was known to the ancient philosophers long before the time of Moses, ether, with all its mysterious and occult properties, containing in itself the germs of universal creation. The upper ether, or Akasha, is the celestial virgin and mother of every existing form and being, from whose bosom, as soon as incubated by the divine spirit, are called into existence matter and life, force and action. Ether is the Aditi of the Hindus, and it is Akasha. Electricity, magnetism, heat, light, and chemical action are so little understood even now that fresh facts are constantly widening the range of our knowledge. Who knows where ends the power of this protean giant ether, or whence its mysterious origin? Who, we mean, that denies the spirit that works in it and evolves out of it all visible forms. It will be an easy task to show that the cosmogonical legends all over the world are based on a knowledge among the ancients of those sciences, which have, in our days, allied themselves in support of the doctrine of evolution, and that further research may demonstrate that these ancients were far better acquainted with the fact of evolution itself, embracing both its physical and spiritual aspects, than we are now. With the old philosophers, evolution was a universal theorem, a doctrine embracing the whole, and an established principle, whereas our modern evolutionists are enabled to present us merely with speculative theoretics, with particular, if not wholly negative theorems. It is idle for the representatives of our modern wisdom to close the debate and pretend that the question is settled, merely because the obscure phraseology of the Mosaic account clashes with the definite exegesis of exact science. If we turn to the ordinances of Manu, we find the prototype of all these ideas. Mostly lost to the Western world in their original form, disfigured by later interpolations and additions, they have, nevertheless, preserved quite enough of their ancient spirit to show its character. Removing the darkness, the self-existent Lord Vishnu, Narayana, etc. became manifest and, wishing to produce beings from his essence, created, in the beginning, water alone. And that he cast seed. That became a golden egg. Whence this self-existent Lord? It is called this, and is spoken of as darkness, imperceptible, without definite qualities, undiscoverable, unknowable, as if wholly in sleep. Having dwelt in that egg for a whole divine year, he who is called in the world Brahma splits that egg in two, and from the upper portion, he forms the heaven, from the lower the earth, and from the middle the sky, and the perpetual place of waters. Directly following these verses, however, there is something more important for us, as it entirely corroborates our esoteric teachings. From verse 14 to 36, evolution is given in the order described in the esoteric philosophy. This cannot be easily gainsaid. Even Medhatithi, the son of Varasvaman, and the author of the commentary, the man of Hasya, whose date, according to the Western Orientalists, is 1000 AD, helps us with his remarks to the elucidation of the truth. He shows himself either unwilling to give out more, because he knew what had to be kept from the profane, or else he was really puzzled. Still, what he does give out makes the septenary principle in man and nature plain enough. Let us begin with chapter 1 of the ordinances, or laws after the self-existent Lord, the unmanifesting logos of the unknown darkness, becomes manifested in the golden egg. It is from this egg, from that which is the undiscrete undifferentiated cause, eternal, which is and is not, from it issued that male who is called in the world Brahma. Here, as in all genuine philosophical systems, we find even the egg or the circle, or zero, boundless infinity, referred to as it and Brahma, the first unit only, referred to as the male god, i.e., the fructifying principle. It is circle split by vertical line, or 10, the decade. On the plane of the septenary, or our world, only, it is called Brahma. On that of the unified decade, in the realm of reality, this male Brahma is an illusion. From self, Atmana, he created mind, which is and is not, and from mind, egoism self-consciousness, A, the ruler, B, the Lord. A, the mind is manas. Medhatithi, the commentator, justly observes here that it is the reverse of this, and shows already interpolation and rearranging, for it is manas that springs from ahamkara or universal self-consciousness, as manas in the microcosm springs from mahat or mahabuddhi, buddhi, in man. For manas is dual. As shown and translated by Colebrook, mind, serving both for sense and action, is an organ by affinity, being cognate with the rest here, meaning that manas are fifth principle, the fifth, because the body was named the first, which is the reverse of the true philosophical order, is in affinity both with Atma Buddhi and with the lower four principles. Hence, our teaching, namely, that manas follows Atma Buddhi to devachan, and that the lower manas, that is to say, the dregs or residue of manas, remains with Kama Rupa, in limbus, or Kama Loka, the abode of the shells. B. Medhatithi translates this as the one conscious of the I or ego, not the ruler as do the Orientalists. Thus also they translate the following shloka. He also, having made the subtle parts of those six the great self and the five organs of sense, of unmeasured brightness, to enter into the elements of self, at Mamatrasu, created all beings. When, according to Medhatithi, it ought to read Matrabha instead of at Mamatrasu, and thus would read, he having pervaded the subtle parts of those six, of unmeasured brightness, by elements of self, created all beings. The latter reading must be the correct one, since he, the self, is what we call Atma, and thus constitutes the seventh principle, the synthesis of the six. Such is also the opinion of the editor of the Manava Dharma Shastra, who seems to have intuitionally entered far deeper into the spirit of the philosophy than has the translator, the late Dr. Burnell, for he hesitates little between the text of Kaluka Bhatta and the commentary of Medhatithi. Rejecting the Tanmatra or subtle elements and the Atma Matra of Kaluka Bhatta, he says, applying the principles to the cosmic self, the six appear rather to be the manas plus the five principles of ether, air, fire, water, earth, having united five portions of those six, with the spiritual element the seventh he, thus, created all existing things. Atma Matra is therefore the spiritual atom as opposed to the elementary, not reflexive elements of himself. Thus he corrects the translation of verse 17. As the subtle elements of bodily forms of this one depend on these six, so the wise call his form Sharira. And he adds that elements mean here portions, or parts, or principles, which reading is borne out by verse 19, which says, this non-eternal universe arises then from the eternal, by means of the subtle elements of forms of those seven very glorious principles, Purusha. Commenting upon which emendation of Medhatithi, the editor remarks, the five elements plus mind, manas and self-consciousness ahamkara are probably meant, subtle elements as before, meaning fine portions of form or principles. Verse 20 shows this, when saying of these five elements, or fine portions of form, rupa plus manas and self-consciousness, that they constitute the seven purusha or principles, called in the Puranas the seven Prakritis. Moreover, these 5 elements or 5 portions are spoken of in verse 27 as those which are called the atomic destructible portions and which are, therefore, distinct from the atoms of the Nyaya. This creative Brahma, issuing from the mundane or golden egg, unites in himself both the male and female principles. He is, in short, the same as all the creative protologoi. Of Brahma, however, it could not be said, as of Dionysos. All such public worship was exoteric, and the great universal symbols were distorted universally, as those of Krishna are now by the Vallabhacharyas of Bombay, the followers of the infant god. But are these popular gods the true deity? Are they the apex and synthesis of the sevenfold creation, man included? Impossible. Each and all are one of the rungs of that septenary ladder of divine consciousness, pagan as Christian. Ein Sof is said to manifest through the 7 letters of the name of Jehovah, who, having usurped the place of the unknown limitless, was given by his devotees his 7 angels of the presence, his 7 principles. But, indeed, they are mentioned in almost every school. In the pure Sankhya philosophy Mahit, Ahamkara and the 5 Tanmatras are called the 7 Prakritis, or natures, and are counted from Mahabhuti, or Mahit, down to earth. Nevertheless, however disfigured by Ezra for rabbinical purposes, is the original Elohistic version, however repulsive at times is even the esoteric meaning in the Hebrew scrolls, far more so indeed than its outward veil or cloaking. Maybe once the Jehovistic portions are eliminated, the Mosaic books are found full of purely occult and priceless knowledge, especially in the first 6 chapters. Read by the aid of the Kabbalah, one finds a matchless temple of occult truths, a well of deeply concealed beauty, hidden under a structure, the visible architecture of which, notwithstanding its apparent symmetry, is unable to stand the criticism of cold reason, or to reveal the age of its hidden truth, for it belongs to all the ages. There is more wisdom concealed under the exoteric fables of the Puranas and Bible than in all the exoteric facts and science in the literature of the world, and more occult true science than there is of exact knowledge in all the academies. Or, in plainer and stronger language, there is as much esoteric wisdom in some portions of the exoteric Puranas and Pentateuch as there is of nonsense and of designedly childish fancy when read only in the dead letter and murderous interpretations of the great dogmatic religions, and especially of their sects. Let anyone read the first verses of Genesis and reflect upon them. There, God commands another God who does his bidding even in the cautious English Protestant authorized translation of King James 1. In the beginning the Hebrew language having no word to express the idea of eternity, God fashions the heaven and the earth, and the latter is without form and void, while the former is in fact not heaven, but the deep chaos, with darkness upon its face. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters or the great deep of the infinite space. And this Spirit is Narayana, or Vishnu. And God said, "Let there be a firmament." And God the second obeyed and made the firmament. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Now the latter does not mean light at all, but, as in the Kabbalah, the androgyne atom Kadmon, or Sephira, spiritual light, for they are one, or, according to the Chaldean Book of Numbers, the secondary angels, the first being the Elohim, who are the aggregate of that fashioning God. For to whom are those words of command addressed? And who is it who commands? That which commands is the eternal law, and he who obeys, the Elohim, the known quantity acting in and with X, or the coefficient of the unknown quantity, the forces of the one force. All this is occultism, and is found in the archaic stanzas. It is perfectly immaterial whether we call these forces the Dayan Chohans, or the Ophanim as Ezekiel does. The one universal light, which to man is darkness, is ever existent, says the Chaldean Book of Numbers. From it proceeds periodically the energy, which is reflected in the deep, or chaos, the storehouse of future worlds, and, once awakened, stirs up and fructifies the latent forces, which are the ever-present eternal potentialities in it. Then awake anew the Brahmas and Buddhas, the co-eternal forces, and a new universe springs into being. In the Sefer Yetzirah, the Kabbalistic book of creation, the author has evidently repeated the words of Manu. In it, the divine substance is represented as having alone existed from the eternity, boundless and absolute, and as having emitted from itself the Spirit. One is the Spirit of the living God, blessed be its name, which liveth forever. Voice, Spirit, and Word, this is the Holy Spirit. And this is the Kabbalistic abstract Trinity, so unceremoniously anthropomorphized by the Christian fathers. From this triple one emanated the whole cosmos. First from one emanated number two, or air, the Father, the creative element, and then number three, water, the mother, proceeded from air. Ether or fire completes the mystic four, the Arbo Al. When the concealed of the concealed wanted to reveal himself, he first made a point, the primordial point, or the first Sephira, air, or Holy Ghost shaped into a sacred form, the 10 Sephiroth, or the heavenly man, and covered it with a rich and splendid garment, that is the world. He maketh the wind his messengers, flaming fire his servants, says the Yetzirah, showing the cosmical character of the later euhemerized elements, and that spirit permeates every atom and cosmos. Paul calls the invisible cosmic beings the elements. But now the elements are degraded into, and limited to, atoms of which nothing is known so far, and which are only children of necessity, as is ether also. As we said in Isis Unveiled, the poor primordial elements have long been exiled, and our ambitious physicists run races to determine who shall add one more to the fledgling brood of the 60 and odd elementary substances. Meanwhile there rages a war in modern chemistry about terms. We are denied the right to call these substances chemical elements, for these are not primordial principles of self-existing essences, out of which the universe was fashioned, according to Plato. Such ideas associated with the word element were good enough for the old Greek philosophy, but modern science rejects them. For, as Mr. William Crookes says, they are unfortunate terms, and experimental science will have nothing to do with any kind of essences, except those which it can see, smell, or taste. It leaves others to the metaphysicians. We must feel grateful even for so much. This primordial substance is called by some chaos. Plato and the Pythagoreans named it the soul of the world, after it had been impregnated by the spirit of that which broods over the primeval waters, or chaos. It is by being reflected in it, say the Kabbalists, that the brooding principle created the phantasmagoria of a visible, manifested universe. Chaos before, ether after this reflection, it is still the deity that pervades space and all things. It is the invisible, imponderable spirit of things, and the invisible, but only too tangible, fluid that radiates from the fingers of the healthy magnetizer, for it is vital electricity, life itself. Called in derision by the Marquis de Merville, the nebulous almighty, it is to this day termed by the theurgists and occultists the living fire, and there is not a Hindu who practices at dawn a certain kind of meditation, but knows its effects. It is the spirit of light and Magnes. As truly expressed by an opponent, Magus and Magnes are two branches growing from the same trunk and shooting forth the same resultants. And in this appellation of living fire, we may also discover the meaning of the puzzling sentence in the Zendavesta. There is a fire that gives knowledge of the future, science and amiable speech, that is to say, which develops an extraordinary eloquence in the Sibyl, the sensitive, and even some orators. Writing upon this subject, in Isis Unveiled, we said, the chaos of the ancients, the Zoroastrian sacred fire, or the Atash Baram of the Parsis, the Hermes fire, the Elms fire of the ancient Germans, the lightning of Cybele, the burning torch of Apollo, the flame on the altar of Pan, the inextinguishable fire in the temple on the Acropolis, and in that of Vesta, the fire flame of Pluto's helm, the brilliant sparks on the caps of the Dioscuri, on the Gorgon's head, the helm of Pallas, and the staff of Mercury, the Egyptian Tara, the Grecian Zeus Catabates, the descending of Pausanias, the Pentecostal fire tongues, the burning bush of Moses, the pillar of fire of Exodus, and the burning lamp of Abram, the eternal fire of the bottomless pit, the Delphic oracular vapors, the sidereal light of the Rosicrucians, the Akasha of the Hindu adepts, the astral light of Eliphaz Levi, the nervor and the fluid of the magnetists, the Odd of Reichenbach, the psychot and actinic force of Thury, the psychic force of Sergeant Cox, and the atmospheric magnetism of some naturalists, galvanism, and finally, electricity. All these are but various names for many different manifestations or effects of the same mysterious, all-pervading cause, the Greek archeus. We now add it is all this and much more. This fire is spoken of in all the Hindu sacred books, as also in the Kabbalistic works. The Zohar explains it as the white hidden fire, in the Risha Havura the white head, whose will causes the fiery fluid to flow in 370 currents in every direction of the universe. It is identical with the serpent that runs with 370 leaps of the Sifrad Sinyaltha, the serpent which, when the perfect man the Metatron is raised, that is to say, when the divine man indwells in the animal man, becomes three spirits, or Atma Buddhi Manas, in our theosophical phraseology. Spirit, then, or cosmic ideation, and cosmic substance, one of whose principles is ether, are one, and include the elements, in the sense St. Paul attaches to them. These elements are the veiled synthesis standing for Dayan Chohans, Devas, Sephrith, Amshaspans, archangels, etc. The ether of science, the Ilus of Beresis, or the Prot-Isle of chemistry, constitutes, so to speak, the rude material, relatively, out of which the above-named builders, following the plan traced out for them eternally in the divine thought, fashion the systems in the cosmos. They are myths, we are told. No more so than ether and the atoms, we answer. The two latter are absolute necessities of physical science, and the builders are as absolute a necessity of metaphysics. We are twitted with the objection, "You never saw them." And we ask the materialists, "Have you ever seen ether, or your atoms, or, again, your force?" Moreover, one of the greatest Western evolutionists of our modern day, co-discoverer with Darwin, Mr. A.R. Wallace, when discussing the inadequacy of natural selection alone, accounting for the physical form of man, admits the guiding action of higher intelligences as a necessary part of the great laws which govern the material universe. These higher intelligences are the Dayan Chohyans of the occultists. Indeed, there are few myths in any religious system worthy of the name, but have a historical as well as a scientific foundation. Myths, justly observes Pocock, are now proved to be fables, just in proportion as we misunderstand them, truths, in proportion as they were once understood. The most distinct and the one prevailing idea, found in all ancient teaching, with reference to cosmic evolution and the first creation of our globe with all its products, organic and inorganic, strange word for an occultist to use, is that the whole cosmos has sprung from the divine thought. This thought impregnates matter, which is co-eternal with the one reality, and all that lives and breathes evolves from the emanations of the one immutable, Parabrahman Mulaprakriti, the eternal one root. The former of these, in its aspect of the central point turned inward, so to say, into regions quite inaccessible to human intellect, is absolute abstraction, whereas, in its aspect as Mulaprakriti, the eternal root of all, it gives one at least some hazy comprehension of the mystery of being. Therefore, it was taught in the inner temples that this visible universe of spirit and matter is but the concrete image of the ideal abstraction. It was built on the model of the first divine idea. Thus our universe existed from eternity in a latent state. The soul animating this purely spiritual universe is the central sun, the highest deity itself. It was not the one who built the concrete form of the idea, but the first begotten, and, as it was constructed on the geometrical figure of the dodecahedron, the first begotten was pleased to employ 12,000 years in its creation. The latter number is expressed in the Tyrrhenian cosmogony, which shows man created in the 6th millennium. This agrees with the Egyptian theory of 6,000 years and with the Hebrew computation. But it is the exoteric form of it. The secret computation explains that the 12,000 and the 6,000 years are years of Brahma, one day of Brahma being equal to 4,320,000,000 years. Sanchuniathan, in his cosmogony, declares that when the wind, spirit, became enamored of its own principles, chaos, an intimate union took place, which connection was called pothos, and from this sprang the seed of all. And the chaos knew not its own production, for it was senseless, but from its embrace with the wind was generated Mot, or the eyeless, mud. From this proceeded the spores of creation and the generation of the universe. 504 Zeus Zen, ether, and Chthoniya, chaotic earth, and Metis, water, his wives, Osiris also representing ether, the first emanation of the supreme deity, Amun, the primeval source of light, and Isis Latona, the goddess earth and water again, Mithras, the rock-born god, the symbol of the male mundane fire, or the personified primordial light, and Mithra, the fire goddess, at once his mother and his wife, the pure element of fire. The active or male principle, regarded as light and heat, in conjunction with earth and water, or matter, the female, or passive, element of cosmical generation, Mithras, who is the son of Borj, the Persian mundane mountain, from which he flashed out as a radiant ray of light, Brahma, the fire god, and his prolific consort, and the Hindu Anai, the refulgent deity from whose body issue 1,000 streams of glory and 7 tongues of flame, and in whose honor certain Brahmins to this day maintain a perpetual fire, Shiva, personated by Meru, the mundane mountain of the Hindus, the terrific fire god, who is said in the legend to have descended from heaven, like the Jewish Jehovah, in a pillar of fire, and a dozen other archaic double-sexed deities all loudly proclaim their hidden meaning. And what could be the dual meaning of these myths but the psychochemical principle of primordial creation, the first evolution, in its triple manifestation of spirit, force and matter, the divine correlation, at its starting point, allegorized as the marriage of fire and water, the products of electrifying spirit, the union of the male active principle with the female passive element which become the parents of their Tellurian child. Cosmic matter, the prima materia, whose soul is ether, and whose shadow is the astral light. But the fragments of the cosmogonical systems that have reached us are now rejected as absurd fables. Nevertheless, occult science, which has survived even the great flood that submerged the antediluvian giants, and with them their very memory, save the record preserved in the secret doctrine, the Bible and other scriptures, still holds the key to all the world problems. Let us, then, apply this key to the rare fragments of long-forgotten cosmogonies, and by means of their scattered portions, endeavor to re-establish the once universal cosmogony of the secret doctrine. The key fits them all. No one can seriously study ancient philosophies without perceiving that the striking similitude of conception in all of them, in their exoteric form very frequently, and in their hidden spirit invariably, is the result of no mere coincidence, but of a concurrent design, and that, during the youth of mankind, there was but one language, one knowledge, one universal religion, when there were no churches, no creeds or sects. But when every man was a priest unto himself. And, if it is shown that already in those early ages which are shut out from our sight by the exuberant growth of tradition, human religious thought developed in uniform sympathy in every portion of the globe, then, it becomes evident that that thought, born under whatever latitude, in the cold north or the burning south, in the east or west, was inspired by the same revelations. And that man was nurtured under the protecting shadow of the same tree of knowledge. Chaos, theos, cosmos. These three are the containment of space, or, as a learned Kabbalist has defined it, space, the all-containing uncontained, is the primary embodiment of simple unity, boundless extension. But, he asks again, boundless extension of what? And makes the correct reply. The unknown container of all, the unknown first cause. This is a most correct definition and answer, most esoteric and true, from every aspect of occult teaching. Space, which, in their ignorance and with their iconoclastic tendency to destroy every philosophic idea of old, the modern wiseacres have proclaimed an abstract idea, and a void is, in reality, the container and the body of the universe in its seven principles. It is a body of limitless extent, whose principles, in occult phraseology each being in its turn a septenary manifest in our phenomenal world, only the grossest fabric of their subdivisions. No one has ever seen the elements in their fullness the doctrine teaches. We have to search for our wisdom in the original expressions and synonyms of the primeval peoples. Even the Jews, the latest of these, show the same idea in their Kabbalistic teachings when they speak of the seven-headed serpent of space, called the Great Sea. In the beginning, the Alham created the heavens and the earth, the six Sephiroth. They created six, and on these all things are based. And these six depend upon the seven forms of the cranium up to the dignity of all dignities. Now wind, air and spirit have ever been synonymous in every nation. Pneuma, spirit, and anemos, wind, with the Greeks, spiritus and ventus, with the Latins, were convertible terms, even if dissociated from the original idea of the breath of life. In the forces of science we see but the material effect of the spiritual effect of one or other of the four primordial elements, transmitted to us by the fourth race, just as we shall transmit either, or rather its gross subdivision, in its fullness to the sixth root race. Chaos was called senseless by the ancients, because chaos and space, being synonymous, it represented and contained in itself all the elements in their rudimentary, undifferentiated state. They made either, the fifth element, the synthesis of the other four, for the ether of the Greek philosophers was not its dregs, although indeed they knew more than science does now of these dregs, ether, which are rightly enough supposed to act as an agent for many forces that manifest on earth. Their ether was the akasha of the Hindus. The ether accepted in physics is but one of its subdivisions. On our plane, the astral light of the Kabbalists, with all its evil, as well as its good effects. Seeing that the essence of ether, or the unseen space, was considered divine, as being the supposed veil of deity, it was regarded as the medium between this life and the next. The ancients considered that when the directing active intelligences, the gods, retired from any portion of either in our space, or the four realms which they superintend, then that particular region was left in the possession of evil, so called by reason of the absence from it of good. The existence of spirit in the common mediator, the ether, is denied by materialism, while theology makes of it a personal God. But the Kabbalist holds that both are wrong, saying that in ether, the elements represent only matter, the blind cosmic forces of nature, while spirit represents the intelligence which directs them. The Aryan, Hermetic, Orphic, and Pythagorean cosmogonical doctrines, as well as those of Sanchuniathon and Beresis, are all based upon one irrefutable formula, that either in chaos, or, in the Platonic language, mind and matter, were the two primeval and eternal principles of the universe, utterly independent of anything else. The former was the all-vivifying intellectual principle, while chaos was a shapeless liquid principle, without form or sense, from the union of which two sprang into existence the universe, or rather the universal world, the first androgynous deity, chaotic matter becoming its body, and ether its soul. According to the phraseology of a fragment of Hermias, chaos, from this union with spirit, obtaining sense, shone with pleasure, and thus was produced protogonos, the firstborn, light. This is the universal trinity, based on the metaphysical conceptions of the ancients, who, reasoning by analogy, made of man, who is a compound of intellect and matter, the microcosm of the macrocosm, or great universe. Nature abhors vacuum, said the Peripatetics, who, though materialists in their way, comprehended perhaps why Democritus, with his instructor Leucippus, taught that the first principles of all things contained in the universe were atoms and a vacuum. The latter means simply latent force or deity, which, before its first manifestation when it became will, communicating the first impulse to these atoms, was the great nothingness, Ein Sof, or no thing, and, therefore, to every sense, a void, or chaos. This chaos, however, became the soul of the world, according to Plato and the Pythagoreans. According to Hindu teaching, deity, in the shape of ether or akasha, pervades all things. It was called, therefore, by the Theurgists the living fire, the spirit of light, and sometimes Magnes. According to Plato, The highest deity itself built the universe in the geometrical form of the dodecahedron, and its first begotten was born of chaos and primordial light, the central sun. This firstborn, however, was only the aggregate of the host of the builders, the first constructive forces, who are called in ancient cosmogonies, the ancients, born of the deeper chaos, and the first point. He is the tetragrammaton, so called, at the head of the seven lower Sephiroth. This was also the belief of the Chaldeans. Philo, the Jew, speaking very flippantly of the first instructors of his ancestors, writes as follows. These Chaldeans were of opinion that the cosmos, among the things that exist, is a single point, either being itself God Theos, or that in it is God, comprehending the soul of all things. Chaos, Theos, cosmos are but the three symbols of their synthesis space. One can never hope to solve the mystery of this tetractys by holding to the dead letter even of the old philosophies as now extant. But even in these, chaos, Theos, cosmos and space are identified in all eternity as the one unknown space, the last word on which will never, perhaps, be known before our seventh round. Nevertheless, the allegories and metaphysical symbols about the primeval and perfect cube are remarkable, even in the exoteric Puranas. There, also, Brahma is Theos, evolving out of chaos, or the great deep, the waters, over which spirit or space, the spirit moving over the face of the future boundless cosmos, is silently hovering in the first hour of reawakening. It is also Vishnu, sleeping on Anantashesha, the great serpent of eternity, of which Western theology, ignorant of the Kabbalah, the only key that opens the secrets of the Bible, has made the devil. It is the first triangle or the Pythagorean triad, the god of the three aspects before it is transformed, through the perfect quadrature of the infinite circle, into the four-faced Brahma. Of him who is and yet is not, from non-being, the eternal cause, is born the being, Purusha, says Manu, the legislator. In the Egyptian mythology, Neph, the eternal unrevealed god, is represented by a snake emblem of eternity encircling a water urn, with its head hovering over the waters, which it incubates with its breath. In this case, the serpent is the Agatha-daemon, the good spirit. In its opposite aspect, it is the Cacodemon, the evil spirit. In the Scandinavian Eddas, the honey-dew, the fruit of the gods, and of the creative busy Yggdrasil bees, falls during the hours of night, when the atmosphere is impregnated with humidity, and in the northern mythologies, as the passive principle of creation, it typifies the creation of the universe out of water. This dew is the astral light in one of its combinations, and possesses creative as well as destructive properties. In the Chaldean legend of Bereshit, Ons or Dagon, the man-fish, instructing the people, shows the infant world created out of water, and all beings originating from this prima materia. Moses teaches that only earth and water can bring into existence a living soul. And we read in the scriptures that herbs could not grow until the Eternal caused it to rain upon earth. In the Mexican Popol Vuh, man is created out of mud or clay, terra glaze, taken from under the water. Brahma creates the great Muni, or first man, seated on his lotus, only after having called spirits into being, who thus enjoyed over mortals a priority of existence, and he creates him out of water, air and earth. Alchemists claim that the primordial or pre-Adamic earth, when reduced to its first substance, is in its second stage of transformation like clear water, the first being the alkist proper. This primordial substance is said to contain within itself the essence of all that goes to make up man. It contains not only all the elements of his physical being, but even the breath of life in a latent state, ready to be awakened. This it derives from the incubation of the Spirit of God upon the face of the water's chaos. In fact, this substance is chaos itself. From this it was that Paracelsus claimed to be able to make his homunculi, and this is why Thales, the great natural philosopher, maintained that water was the principle of all things in nature. Job says that dead things are formed from under the waters, and the inhabitants thereof. In the original text, instead of dead things it is written dead refame, giants are mighty primitive men, from whom evolution may one day trace our present race. In the primordial state of the creation, says Pollier's Mythologie des Indes, the rudimental universe, submerged in water, reposed in the bosom of Vishnu. Sprung from this chaos and darkness, Brahma, the architect of the world, poised on a lotus leaf, floated moved upon the waters, unable to discern anything but water and darkness. Perceiving such a dismal state of things, Brahma soliloquizes in consternation. Who am I? Whence came I? Then he hears a voice. Direct your thoughts to Bhagavat. Brahma, rising from his natatory position, seats himself upon the lotus, in an attitude of contemplation, and reflects upon the Eternal, who, pleased with this evidence of piety, disperses the primeval darkness and opens his understanding. After this Brahma issues from the universal egg infinite chaos as light, for his understanding is now opened, and he sets himself to work. He moves on the eternal waters, with the Spirit of God within himself, and in his capacity of mover of the waters, he is Vishnu, or Narayana. This is, of course, exoteric, yet, in its main idea, it is as identical as possible with the Egyptian cosmogony, which, in its opening sentences, shows After, or Mother Night, representing illimitable darkness, as the primeval element which covered the infinite abyss, animated by water and the universal spirit of the Eternal, dwelling alone in chaos. Similarly, in the Jewish scriptures, the history of the creation opens with the Spirit of God and his creative emanation, another deity. The Zohar teaches that it is the primordial elements, the trinity of fire, air and water, the four cardinal points, and all the forces of nature, which form collectively the voice of the will, memrab, or the word, the logos of the absolute silent all. The indivisible point, limitless and unknowable, spreads itself over space, and thus forms a veil, the mulaprakriti of Parabrahman, which conceals this absolute point. In the cosmogonies of all the nations it is the architects, synthesized by the demiurge, in the Bible the Elohim, or Alham, who fashion cosmos out of chaos, and who are the collective theos, male, female, spirit and matter. By a series, Yom, of foundations, Haseth, the Alham caused earth and heaven to be. In Genesis, it is first Alham, then Java Alham, and finally Jehovah after the separation of the sexes in the 4th chapter. It is noticeable that nowhere, except in the later, or rather the last, cosmogonies of our 5th race, does the ineffable and unutterable name the symbol of the unknown deity, which was used only in the mysteries occur in connection with the creation of the universe. It is the movers, the runners, the theoi, who do the work of formation, the messengers of the Manvantaric law, who have now become in Christianity simply the messengers, Malachim. This seems to be also the case in Hinduism or early Brahmanism. For in the Rig Veda, it is not Brahma who creates, but the Prajapatis, the lords of being who are also the rishis. The term rishi, according to Professor Mahadeo Kant, being connected with the word to move, to lead on, applied to them in their terrestrial character, when, as patriarchs, they lead their hosts on the 7 rivers. Moreover, the very word God in the singular, embracing all the gods, or theoi, came to the superior civilized nations from a strange source, one as entirely and preeminently phallic as the sincere outspokenness of the Indian lingam. The attempt to derive God from the Anglo-Saxon synonym good is an abandoned idea, for in no other language, from the Persian coda down to the Latin deus, has an instance been found of the name for God being derived from the attribute of goodness. To the Latin races it comes from the Aryan dios, the day, to the Slavonian, from the Greek Bacchus, bog, and to the Saxon races directly from the Hebrew yod, or jod. The latter is the number letter 10, male and female, and yod is the phallic hook. Hence the Saxon god, the Germanic got, and the English god. This symbolic term may be said to represent the creator of physical humanity on the terrestrial plane, but surely it had nothing to do with the formation or creation of either spirit, gods, or cosmos. Chaos Theos Cosmos, the triple deity, is all in all. Therefore, it is said to be male and female, good and evil, positive and negative, the whole series of contrasted qualities. When latent, in pralaya, it is incognizable and becomes the unknowable deity. It can be known only in its active functions, hence as matter, force and living spirit, the correlations and outcome, or the expression, on the visible plane, of the ultimate and ever to be unknown unity. In its turn, this triple unit is the producer of the 4 primary elements, which are known, in our visible terrestrial nature, as the 7, so far the 5 elements, each divisible into 14 7 times 7 sub-elements, with about 70 of which chemistry is acquainted. Every cosmical element, such as fire, air, water, earth, partaking of the qualities and defects of its primaries, is in its nature good and evil, force or spirit, and matter, and each, therefore, is at one and the same time life and death, health and disease, action and reaction. They are ever forming matter, under the never-ceasing impulse of the one element, the incognizable, represented in the world of phenomena by either. They are the immortal gods who give birth and life to all. In the philosophical writings of Solomon ben Yehuda ibn Jebril, in treating of the structure of the universe, it is said, Ar Yehuda began, it is written. Elohim said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Come, see. At the time that the Holy created the world, he created 7 heavens above. He created 7 earths below, 7 seas, 7 days, 7 rivers, 7 weeks, 7 years, 7 times, and 7,000 years that the world has been. The Holy is in the 7th of all. This, besides showing a strange identity with the cosmogony of the Puranas, corroborates all our teachings with regard to number 7, as briefly given in esoteric Buddhism. The Hindus have an endless series of allegories to express this idea. In the primordial chaos, before it became developed into the Sapta Samudra, or 7 oceans emblematical of the 7 gunas, or conditioned qualities, composed of trigunas, sattva, rajas and tamas light, latent both amrita, or immortality, and visha, or poison, death, evil. This is to be found in the allegorical churning of the ocean by the gods. Amrita is beyond any guna, for it is unconditioned, per se, but when once fallen into phenomenal creation, it became mixed with evil, chaos, with latent theos in it, before cosmos was evolved. Hence we find Vishnu, the personification of eternal law, periodically calling forth cosmos into activity, or, in allegorical phraseology, churning out of the primitive ocean, or boundless chaos, the Amrita of eternity, reserved only for the gods and devas, and in the task he has to employ nagas and asuras, or demons in exoteric Hinduism. The whole allegory is highly philosophical, and indeed we find it repeated in every ancient system of philosophy. Thus we find it in Plato, who, having fully embraced the ideas which Pythagoras had brought from India, compiled and published them in a form more intelligible than the original mysterious numerals of the Samian sage. Thus the cosmos is the sun with Plato, having for his father and mother divine thought and matter. The Egyptians, says Dunlap, distinguish between an older and younger Horus, the former the brother of Osiris, the latter the son of Osiris and Isis. The first is the idea of the world remaining in the demiurgic mind, born in darkness before the creation of the world. The second Horus is this idea going forth from the Logos, becoming clothed with matter, and assuming an actual existence. The Chaldean oracles speak of the mundane God, eternal, boundless, young and old, of winding form. This winding form is a figure to express the vibratory motion of the astral light, with which the ancient priests were perfectly well acquainted, though the name astral light was invented by the Martinists. Cosmolatry has the finger of scorn pointed at its superstitions by modern science. Science, however, before laughing at it, ought, as advised by a French savant, to entirely remodel its own system of cosmoneumatological education. Satis eloquentii, sapientii parum. Cosmolatry, like pantheism, in its ultimate expression, may be made to express itself in the same words in which the Purana describes Vishnu. He is only the ideal cause of the potencies to be created in the work of creation, and from him proceed the potencies to be created after they have become the real cause. Save that one ideal cause, there is no other to which the world can be referred. Through the potency of that cause, every created thing comes by its proper nature. On the hidden deity, its symbols and glyphs. The logos, or creative deity, the word made flesh of every religion, has to be traced to its ultimate source and essence. In India, it is a proteus of 1008 divine names and aspects in each of its personal transformations, from Brahma Purusha, through the 7 divine Rishis and 10 semi-divine Prajapatis, also Rishis, down to the divine human avatars. The same puzzling problem of the one in many and the multitude in one is found in other pantheons, in the Egyptian, the Greek and the Chaldeo-Judaic, the latter having made confusion still more confused by presenting its gods as euhemerizations, in the shapes of patriarchs. And these patriarchs are now accepted by those who reject Romulus as a myth, and are represented as living and historical entities. Verbum satis sapienti. In the Zohar, Ein Sof is also the One, the infinite unity. This was known to the very few learned fathers of the Church, who were aware that Jehovah was no highest God, but a third-rate potency. But while complaining bitterly of the Gnostics, and saying, "Our heretics hold that Propator is known, but to the only begotten Son who is Brahma, that is to the mind now Cyrenius failed to mention that the Jews did the same in their real secret books." Valentinus, the profoundest doctor of the Gnosis, held that there was a perfect aeon who existed before Bythos, the first father of unfathomable nature, which is the second logos, called propator. It is this aeon who springs as a ray from Ein Sof, which does not create, an aeon who creates, or through whom, rather, everything is created, or evolves. For, as the Basilidians taught, there was a supreme god, Abrasax, by whom was created mind Mahat, in Sanskrit, nous, in Greek. From mind proceeded the word, logos, from the word, providence, divine light, rather than from it virtue and wisdom and principalities, powers, angels, etc. By these angels the 365 eons were created. Amongst the lowest, indeed, and those who made this world, he Basilide sets last of all the God of the Jews, whom he denies to be God, and very rightly, affirming he is one of the angels. Here, then, we find the same system as in the Puranas, wherein the incomprehensible drops a seed, which becomes the golden egg, from which Brahma is produced. Brahma produces Mahat, etc. True esoteric philosophy, however, speaks neither of creation nor of evolution, in the sense in which the exoteric religions do. All these personified powers are not evolutions from one another, but so many aspects of the one and sole manifestation of the Absolute All. The same system as that of the Gnostic emanations prevails in the Sephirothic aspects of Ein Sof, and, as these aspects are in space and time, a certain order is maintained in their successive appearances. Therefore, it becomes impossible not to take notice of the great changes that the Zohar has undergone under the handling of generations of Christian mystics. For, even in the metaphysics of the Talmud, the lower face or lesser countenance, or microprosopis, could never be placed on the same plane of abstract ideals as the higher, or greater countenance, macroprosopis. The latter is, in the Chaldean Kabbalah, a pure abstraction, the word or logos, or daber in Hebrew, which word, though it becomes in fact a plural number, or words, dabarim, when it reflects itself, or falls into the aspect of a host of angels, or Sephiroth, the number is still collectively one, and on the ideal plane a naught, circle, nothing. It is without form or being, with no likeness with anything else. And even Philo calls the Creator, the Logos who stands next God, the second God when he speaks of the second God, who is his the highest God's wisdom. Deity is not God. It is no thing, and darkness. It is nameless, and therefore called Ein Sof, the word Ein meaning nothing. The highest God, the unmanifested Logos, is its Son. Nor are most of the Gnostic systems which have come down to us, mutilated as they are by the Church Fathers, anything better than the distorted shells of the original speculations. Nor were they, moreover, ever open to the public or general reader, for had their hidden meaning or esotericism been revealed, it would have been no more an esoteric teaching, and this could never have been. Marcus, the chief of the Marcosians, who flourished in the middle of the 2nd century, and taught that deity had to be viewed under the symbol of 4 syllables, gave out more of the esoteric truths than any other Gnostic. But even he was never well understood. For it is only on the surface or dead letter of his revelation that it appears that God is a quaternary, to wit, the ineffable, the silence, the Father, and truth, since in reality it is quite erroneous, and divulges only one more esoteric riddle. This teaching of Marcus was that of the early Kabbalists and is ours. For he makes of deity the number 30, in 4 syllables, which, translated esoterically, means a triad or triangle, and a quaternary or a square, in all seven, which, on the lower plane, made the seven divine or secret letters, of which the God name is composed. This requires demonstration. In his revelation, speaking of divine mysteries expressed by means of letters and numbers, Marcus narrates how the supreme tetrad came down unto him, from the region which cannot be seen nor named, in a female form, because the world would have been unable to bear her appearing in a male figure, and revealed to him the generation of the universe, untold before to either gods or men. The first sentence already contains a double meaning. Why should the apparition of a female figure be more easily borne, or listened to, by the world than a male figure? On the face of it, this appears nonsensical. But to one who is acquainted with the mystery language, it is quite clear and simple. Esoteric philosophy, or the secret wisdom, was symbolized by a female form, while a male figure stood for the unveiled mystery. Hence, the world, not being ready to receive it, could not bear it, and the revelation of Marcus had to be given allegorically. Thus he writes, when first its father sc. of the tetrad the inconceivable, the beingless, sexless the Kabbalistic Ein Sof, desired that its ineffable the first logos, or eon should be born, and its invisible should be clothed with form, its mouth opened, and uttered the word like unto itself. This word logos standing near showed it what it was, manifesting itself in the form of the invisible one. Now the uttering of the ineffable name through the word came to pass in this manner. It the supreme logos uttered the first word of its name, which was a combination syllable of 4 elements letters. Then the second combination was added, also of 4 elements. Then the third, composed of 10 elements, and after this the fourth was uttered, which contained 12 elements. The utterance of the whole name consisted thus of 30 elements and of 4 combinations. Each element has its own letters and peculiar character, and pronunciation, and groupings and similitudes, but none of them perceives the form of that of which it is the element, nor understands the utterance of its neighbor, but what each sounds forth itself, as sounding forth all it can, that it thinks good to call the whole. And these sounds are they which manifest in form the beingless and ingenerable eon, and these are the forms which are called angels, perpetually beholding the face of the Father, the Logos, the second God who stands next God the inconceivable according to Philo. This is as plain as ancient esoteric secrecy could make it. It is as Kabbalistic though less veiled than the Zohar, in which the mystic names, or attributes, are also 4-syllabled, 12, 42, and even 72-syllabled words. The tetrad shows to Marcus the truth in the shape of a naked woman, and letters every limb of that figure, calling her head, her neck, shoulders and hands iss etc. In this, Sephira is easily recognized, the head, or crown, Kether, being numbered 1, the brain, or Chakma, 2, the heart, or intelligence, Bina, 3, and the other 7 Sephiroth representing the limbs of the body. The Sephirothic tree is the universe, and Adam Kadmon personifies it in the West, as Brahma represents it in India. Throughout, the 10 Sephiroth are represented as divided into the 3 higher, or the spiritual triad, and the lower septenary. The true esoteric meaning of the sacred number 7, though cleverly veiled in the Zohar, is betrayed by the double way of writing the term, in the beginning or Bereshith, and Beresheth, the latter the higher, or upper wisdom. As shown by S.L. McGregor Mathers and Isaac Meyer, both of these Kabbalists being supported by the best ancient authorities. These words have a dual and secret meaning. Brasheth bara Elohim means that the six, over which stands the seventh Sephira, belong to the lower material class, or, as the author says, 7 are applied to the lower creation, and 3 to the spiritual man, the heavenly prototypic or first Adam. When the theosophists and occultists say that God is no being, for it is nothing, no thing, they are more reverential and religiously respectful to the deity than those who call God he, and thus make of him a gigantic male. He who studies the Kabbalah will soon find the same idea in the ultimate thought of its authors, the earlier and great Hebrew initiates, who got this secret wisdom in Babylonia from the Chaldean hierophants, just as Moses got his in Egypt. The Zoharic system cannot very well be judged by its translations into Latin and other tongues, when all its ideas were softened and made to fit in with the views and policy of its Christian arrangers, for its original ideas are identical with those of all other religious systems. The various cosmogonies show that the universal soul was considered by every archaic nation as the mind of the demiurgic creator, and that it was called the mother, Sophia, or the female wisdom, with the Gnostics, the Sephira, with the Jews, Sarasvati or Vach, with the Hindus, the Holy Ghost also being a female principle. Hence, the Kurios or Logos born from it was, with the Greeks, the God, mind, nous. Now Kurios signifies the pure and unmixed nature of intellect wisdom, says Plato, in Cratylus, and Kurios is Mercury, Mercurius, Markurios, the divine wisdom, and Mercury is Sol the sun, from whom thought Hermes received this divine wisdom. While, then, the logoi of all countries and religions are correlative, in their sexual aspects, with the female soul of the world or the great deep, the deity, from which these two in one have their being, is ever concealed and called the Hidden One, and is connected only indirectly with creation, as it can act only through the dual force emanating from the eternal essence. Even Aesculapius, called the savior of all, is identical, according to ancient classical writers, with the Egyptian Ptah, the creative intellect, or divine wisdom, and with Apollo, Baal, Adonis and Hercules. And Ptah, in one of its aspects, is the Anima Mundi, the universal soul of Plato, the divine spirit of the Egyptians, the Holy Ghost of the early Christians and Gnostics, and the Akasha of the Hindus, and even, in its lower aspect, the astral light. For Ptah was originally the god of the dead, he into whose bosom they were received, hence the limbus of the Greek Christians, or the astral light. It was far later that Ptah was classed with the sun gods, his name signifying he who opens, as he is shown to be the first to unveil the face of the dead mummy, to call the soul to life in his bosom. Neph, the eternal unrevealed, is represented by the snake emblem of eternity encircling a water urn, with its head hovering over the waters which it incubates with its breath, another form of the one original idea of darkness, with its ray moving on the waters, etc. As the Logos soul, this permutation is called Ptah. As the Logos creator, he becomes Imhotep, his son, the god of the handsome face. In their primitive characters, these two were the first cosmic duad, Nut, space or sky, and Nun, the primordial waters, the androgyne unity, above whom was the concealed breath of Neph. And all of them had the aquatic animals and plants sacred to them, the ibis, the swan, the goose, the crocodile, and the lotus. Returning to the Kabbalistic deity, this concealed unity is then Ein Sof, endless, boundless, non-existent, So long as the Absolute is within Ulam, the boundless and termless time. As such, Ein Sof cannot be the creator or even the modeler of the universe, nor can it be or light. Therefore Ein Sof is also darkness. The immutably infinite and the absolutely boundless can neither will, think, nor act. To do this, it has to become finite, and it does so by its ray penetrating into the mundane egg, or infinite space, and emanating from it as a finite God. All this is left to the ray latent in the One. When the period arrives, the absolute will expands naturally the force within it, according to the law of which it is the inner and ultimate essence. The Hebrews did not adopt the egg as a symbol, but they substituted for it the duplex heavens for, translated correctly, the sentence God made the heavens and the earth would read. In and out of his own essence, as a womb the mundane egg, God created the two heavens. The Christians, however, have chosen the dove, the bird and not the egg, as the symbol of their Holy Ghost. Whoever acquaints himself with Hud, the Merkabah and the Lagash secret speech or incantation, will learn the secret of secrets. Lagash is nearly identical in meaning with Vach, the hidden power of the mantras. When the active period has arrived, from within the eternal essence of Ein Sof, comes forth Sephira, the active power, called the primordial point and the crown, Kether. It is only through her that the unbounded wisdom could give a concrete form to the abstract thought. Two sides of the upper triangle, by which the ineffable essence and its manifested body, the universe, are symbolized, the right side and the base, are compassed of unbroken lines. The third, the left side, is dotted. It is through the latter that emerges Sephira. Spreading in every direction, she finally encompasses the whole triangle. In this emanation the triple triad is formed. From the invisible dew falling from the higher unitriad, the head thus leaving seven Sephiroth only Sephira creates primeval waters, or in other words, chaos takes shape. It is the first stage towards the solidification of spirit which, through various modifications, will produce earth. It requires earth and water to make a living soul, says Moses. It requires the image of an aquatic bird to connect it with water, the female element of procreation, with the egg and the bird that fecundates it. When Sephira emerges as an active power from within the latent deity, she is female. When she assumes the office of a creator, she becomes a male, hence, she is androgyne. She is the father and mother, a deity of the Hindu cosmogony and of the secret doctrine. If the oldest Hebrew scrolls had been preserved, the modern Jehovah worshipper would have found that many and uncomely were the symbols of the creative God. The frog and the moon, typical of his generative character, was the most frequent. All the birds and animals now called unclean in the Bible have been the symbols of this deity in days of old. A mask of uncleanness was placed over them in order to preserve them from destruction, because they were so sacred. The brazen serpent is not a bit more poetical than the goose or swan, if symbols are to be accepted a letter. In the words of the Zohar, the indivisible point, which has no limit and cannot be comprehended because of its purity and brightness, expanded from without, forming a brightness that served the indivisible point as a veil, yet the latter also could not be viewed in consequence of its immeasurable light. It too expanded from without, and this expansion was its garment. Thus through a constant upheaving motion, finally the world originated. The spiritual substance sent forth by the infinite light is the first Sephira or Shekinah. Sephira, exoterically, contains all the other 9 Sephiroth in her. Esoterically, she contains but two, chakma or wisdom, a masculine active potency whose divine name is Ja and Bina, or intelligence, a feminine passive potency, represented by the divine name Jehovah, which two potencies form, with Sephira the third, the Jewish Trinity or the crown, Kether. These two Sephiroth, called Abba, Father, and Amona, Mother, are the Duad, or the double-sexed logos, from which issued the other seven Sephiroth. Thus, the first Jewish triad, Sephira, Chakma and Bina, is the Hindu Trimurti. However, veiled even in the Zohar, and still more in the exoteric pantheon of India, every particular connected with one is reproduced in the other. The Prajapatis are the Sephiroth. 10 with Brahma, they dwindle to 7 when the Trimurti, or the Kabbalistic triad, are separated from the rest. The 7 builders or creators become the 7 Prajapati, or the 7 Rishis, in the same order as the Sephiroth become the creators, then the patriarchs, etc. In both secret systems, the one universal essence is incomprehensible and inactive in its absoluteness, and can be connected with the building of the universe only in an indirect way. In both, the primeval male-female, or androgynous, principle and its 10 and 7 emanations Brahma Viraj and Aditi Vach, on the one hand, and the Elohim Jehovah, or Adam Adami, Adam Kadmon, and Sephira Eve, on the other, with their Prajapatis and Sephiroth in their totality, represent primarily the archetypal man, the proto-logos, and it is only in their secondary aspect that they become cosmic powers and astronomical or sidereal bodies. If Aditi is the mother of the gods, Deva Matri, Eve is the mother of all living. Both are the Shakti, or generative power, in their female aspect, of the heavenly man, and they are both compound creators. Says a Gupta Vidya Sutra. In the beginning, a ray, issuing from Paramarthika, the one and only true existence, became manifested in Vyavaharika conventional existence, which was used as a vahana to descend within to the universal mother, and to cause her to expand, swell, bria. And in the Zohar it is stated, the infinite unity, formless and without similitude, after the form of the heavenly man was created, used it. The unknown light darkness used the heavenly form as a chariot through which to descend, and wished to be called by this form, which is the sacred name Jehovah. As the Zohar again says, in the beginning was the will of the king, prior to any other existence. It the will sketched the forms of all things that had been concealed, but now came into view. And there went forth as a sealed secret, from the head of Ein Sof, a nebulous spark of matter, without shape or form. Life is drawn from below, and from above the source renews itself. The sea is always full, and spreads its waters everywhere. Thus the deity is compared to a shoreless sea, to water which is the fountain of life. The seventh palace, the fountain of life, is the first in the order from above. Hence the Kabbalistic tenet on the lips of the very Kabbalistic Solomon, who says in Proverbs, "Wisdom hath builded her house, it hath hewn out its 7 pillars." Whence, then, all this identity of ideas, if there were no primeval universal revelation? The few points so far brought out are like a few straws in a stack, in comparison to that which will be disclosed as the work proceeds. If we turn to the Chinese cosmogony, the most hazy of all, even there the same idea is found. Sight, the self-existent, is the unknown darkness, the root of the Wu-Yang Shu, boundless age, Amitabha, and Tien, heaven, come later on. The great extreme of Confucius gives the same idea, his straws notwithstanding. The latter are a source of great amusement to the missionaries, who laugh at every heathen religion, despise and hate that of their brother Christians of other denominations, and yet one and all accept their own Genesis, literally. If we turn to the Chaldean, we find in it Anu, the concealed deity, the one whose name, moreover, shows it to be of Sanskrit origin, for Anu in Sanskrit means atom, Aniyamsam Aniyasam, smallest of the small, being a name of Parabrahman in the Vedantic philosophy, in which Parabrahman is described as smaller than the smallest atom and greater than the greatest sphere or universe, Anagraniyas and Mahataravat. In the first verses of the Akkadian Genesis, as found in the cuneiform texts on the Babylonian tiles or Latiers cocktails, and as translated by George Smith, we find Anu, the passive deity, or Ein Sof, Bel, the creator, the spirit of God, Sephira, moving on the face of the waters, hence water itself, and he, the universal soul, or wisdom of the three combined. The first 8 verses read as follows. 1. When above were not raised the heavens. 2. And below on the earth a plant had not grown up. 3. The abyss had not broken open their boundaries. 4. The chaos, or water, Tiamat, the sea, was the producing mother of the whole of them. This is the cosmical Aditi and Sephira. 5. Those waters at the beginning were ordained, but 6. A tree had not grown, a flower had not unfolded. 7. When the gods had not sprung up, any one of them. 8. A plant had not grown, an order did not exist. This was the chaotic or anti-genetic period, the double swan, and the dark swan which becomes white when light is created. The symbol chosen for the majestic ideal of the universal principle may perhaps seem little calculated to answer its sacred character. A goose, or even a swan, will, no doubt, be thought an unfit symbol to represent the grandeur of the spirit. Nevertheless, it must have had some deep occult meaning, since it figures not only in every cosmogony and world religion, but was also chosen by the Crusaders, among the medieval Christians, as the vehicle of the Holy Ghost, which was supposed to be leading the army to Palestine to wrench the tomb of the Savior from the hands of the Saracen. If we are to credit Professor Draper's statement, in his intellectual development of Europe, the Crusaders, under Peter the Hermit, were preceded, at the head of the army, by the Holy Ghost, under the shape of a white gander in the company of a goat. Seb, the Egyptian god of time, carries a goose on his head. Jupiter assumes the form of a swan, and so also does Brahma, and the root of all this is that mystery of mysteries, the mundane egg. One should learn the reason of a symbol before depreciating it. The dual element of air and water is that of the ibis, swan, goose and pelican, of crocodiles and frogs, lotus flowers and water lilies, etc. And the result is the choice of the most unseemly symbols by the modern, as much as by the ancient mystics. Pan, the great god of nature, was generally figured in company with aquatic birds, geese especially, and so were other gods. If later on, with the gradual degeneration of religion, the gods to whom geese were sacred became priapic deities, it does not, therefore, follow that waterfowls were made sacred to Pan and other phallic deities, as some scoffers even of antiquity would have it, but that the abstract and divine power of procreative nature had become grossly anthropomorphized. Nor does the swan of Leda show priapic doings, and her enjoyment thereof, as Mr. Hargrave Jennings chastely expresses it, For the myth is but another version of the same philosophical idea of cosmogony. Swans are frequently found associated with Apollo, as they are the emblems of water and fire, and also of the sunlight, before the separation of the elements. Our modern symbologists might profit by some remarks made by a well-known writer, Mrs. Lydia Maria Child, who says, "From time immemorial an emblem has been worshipped in Hindustan as the type of creation, or the origin of life. Shiva, or the Mahadeva, being not only the reproducer of human forms, but also the fructifying principle, the generative power that pervades the universe. The maternal emblem is likewise a religious type. This reverence for the production of life introduced into the worship of Osiris the sexual emblems. Is it strange that they regarded with reverence the great mystery of human birth? Were they impure thus to regard it? Or are we impure that we do not so regard it? But no clean and thoughtful mind could so regard them. We have traveled far, and unclean have been the paths, since those old anchorites first spoke of God and the soul in the solemn depths of their first sanctuaries. Let us not smile at their mode of tracing the infinite and the incomprehensible cause throughout all the mysteries of nature, lest by so doing, we cast the shadow of our own grossness on their patriarchal simplicity." And that's not all. Our experts and regular viewers respond to all comments. Also check if you forgot to subscribe and set your bell to receive notifications about new audiobooks and other useful self-development materials that we release regularly. Join in the discussions, don't forget to give likes and, if possible and inspired, support the development of the channel financially. All useful links will be in the description and the first attached comment. Goodness, love and wisdom to all. And now move on to watch the next part of the video at the links below, or choose something from the playlists of the channel and those you see on the screen.